Hey everyone, my name is David Rao, and I'm the music teacher who blogs at makemomentsmatter.org. You can also find my ideas on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, and a variety of other places when you search for my name or Make Moments Matter Music Education. I'm so excited to be sharing with y'all tonight some of my favorite tips and tricks and ideas about learning centers. I'm taking a little bit of a break from the normal. Usually I spend this time sharing about all of my lesson plans for the week, kindergarten through 5th grade, and then doing a deep dive on one grade level, one specific lesson that I'm teaching in that rotation. And this week I'm doing things just a little bit different. I'm taking a break from that normal routine because I am on break. My school district runs on a balanced calendar, and so because of that, we have about 6 or 7 weeks of instruction and then a full week off, and then 6 or 7 weeks of instruction and then a full week off. And then, so every quarter or so we get a week-long break, which is great because it means that I can schedule a dentist appointment. But it's not so great because it means I have to start with students on August 1st. But anyway, I'm in one of those weeks where I have my week off. And so I just spent some time at Texas Music Educators at TMEA, sharing about learning centers and small groups, and I thought this would be a fun chance for me to share more about that. So if you weren't at TMEA, this will be a chance to get some of that information, and if you were at TMEA, this is a chance to get a little bit more, to see some more things in depth and learn a little bit more, have more of a dialogue about that. And so, one of my favorite things about these live videos is that you can leave questions in the comments, and we can sort of go back and forth. Whereas if you're at a large PD like TMEA was, it's hard to ask a question in the moment. And so if you have a question, please ask that here in the comments section as we're going along so that I can double back later and answer that, or maybe throughout the week as people continue watching these videos, other teachers can go back and leave comments too. So that's sort of my hope for what's going to happen today. And I'm planning on speaking about choosing groups, choosing student groups, what size, how many, how you do that, teaching them to rotate, and a little bit more about setup there, talking about time at each station and how to switch from one station to the next, how to use and reuse and reuse and reuse materials so that you're not constantly creating, and also a little bit about storage. That's my plan. But as I said, I was just at a major music education convention, so I figured I should update you on my puppet purchases before I do anything else, because I think y'all know I love using puppets with kids. And of course, I was at TMEA, which has one of the biggest exhibit floors of all music education conventions. And so I found a couple of puppets that I love. So this first one is, I think, hilarious. It's a lightning bug or a firefly. Sort of funny about where you live in the country, what you call it. But I think it's so fun because there are a lot of fun little Firefly Lightning Bug songs. If you have any that you really love, send it to me. Send me an email. My email is makemomentsmatter@gmail.com. But my favorite thing about this little lightning bug is this. His little bottom lights up, which I think is so cute. Anyway, so I love this little guy, and I'm already thinking of all these fun little ideas that you could do with it. I already have a couple bumblebees and some bugs, and some other little bugs and things and spiders and stuff, so this will be a fun little next step with that. And then my favorite thing, I saw this at AOSA, at the American Orchestral Association National Conference in November. And I saw it in the booth and I was like, oh, that's amazing, but I don't have time now, so I'll catch it and I'll buy it when I come back from the next session. And guess what? When I came back from that session, it was gone. And they were out of stock at the convention, and I just didn't get it. And so I decided I should buy it at TME. So I did. And this is a narwhal puppet, which I think is so cute. Okay, so it's got the huge long tusk, right? And he opens his mouth and he can talk. And then there's actually another little pocket back here so you can control his tail. So he can, I don't know, do some flipper sort of thing. But I love it because you might remember that earlier this year I shared about this amazing book called Wendell the Narwhal. And Wendell the Narwhal is by Emily Dove. You can get it on, well, actually it may be back-ordered right now. I think West Music said it was back-ordered when I saw things at their booth. But Wendell the Narwhal is all about this little poor sad little narwhal who lives in the ocean because all the other animals can make music, like the octopus can pop, and the jellyfish go wub-a-wub, and the blowfish goes whoosh, and the clams go clappity clap clap clap, like there is an instrument exploration lesson buried in this. But poor little Wendell, he can't make any sounds like that. He can't do that. But when he gets so frustrated, sorry, I jumped past it, he slams his little tusk on a rock, tap, and the ocean falls silent because they hear him, and so then he uses his tusk like a conductor would, and he swishes his little tusk around, and they all make music together. Oh my gosh, it's the cutest story. So I thought it would be perfect that if I read the book to kids, we could do a little instrument exploration lesson. You could use claves, or sorry, not claves. You could use castanets for the clams, and I'm sure you could come up with some other fun things. I'm sure scarves would be involved. But you could have, your bongos and your wood blocks and things that you maybe don't normally use. And then one kid could hold Wendell and could be a conductor or could keep the steady beat. I'm already thinking of fun ideas you could do. Or you could just use Wendell in your story, or you could use Wendell and then give them a baton or even a drumstick, and you could transition and they could do that. But I knew that I had to have the puppets, so I got Wendell at TMEA, and I just had to share about that. So I thought that was maybe my favorite thing, one of my favorite things from the booth, and I'm so glad I finally got it, because I missed getting it at AOSA, and I regretted it for months. So anyway, I'm going to share just a little bit today about centers, and about those 5 different things I already talked about. So choosing groups, and what do you do with groups, rotation and setup, time at each station, how to switch, using and reusing materials over and over, and then storage solutions. But I'm going to start by saying that I think so many people have questions about centers. Like, we all have these questions in our head. What if this happens? And what about this? And how about this thing? And what do I do for this? Or why do you do it that way? Or, we all have questions about centers. And I think it's those questions that are prohibitive, that make people choose not to do centers or are hesitant about centers. And the thing that I've learned is that when you really go for it with centers, you try and you fail. And then you learn from failing and you change things up and you do it better next time. And so failing is sort of inevitable, but the more you can think ahead and plan ahead and have backup plans, the better off you'll be. So I just wanted to share some of these tips and ideas, not because they'll be perfect for your classroom, but because they might be helpful in helping you set up centers for your room. And so, take these ideas and adapt them for how they will work best for your classroom and your students, because that's one of the best things about learning centers is that they are made. Literally the idea of centers is that you are differentiating and creating something that will be perfect for your students. And so I hope that you take all of this advice and think, okay, I could adapt it this way, I could change it this way, I could do whatever, and then don't plan on doing centers tomorrow, maybe a week from tomorrow, but give yourself time to adapt and think and change what you're going to do, and then be okay with things not working the first time. That's the beauty of centers. You can just rotate, do it again, and then try it again, and it might work better the next time. So, okay, disclaimer over. Let's talk about groups. So you might know that I've shared about this before, but in my classroom, I have 4 groups in every class. At the beginning of the year, I take my roster and I divide it up, and I do 4 different groups. And so actually when I do it, there are a lot of different things, but I divide them up and I name them after the 4 instrument families. So woodwinds, percussion, strings, and brass. And so each kid knows, oh, I'm a part of the woodwinds family, or I'm a part of the strings family. And I have that color coded in my room, and so that kids every day, they are reminded of what family they're a part of. So, maybe I'll say like, oh, well, who gets their ukuleles first? Well, strings is the family of the week, so you can come up and get yours first, so they're reminded. Or maybe I'll say, oh, well, woodwinds, you get to come. You're the family of the week. You can come on up. Or, when we line up the lines on my ceiling, I have colored 4 of the long lines to be the 4 colors of the instrument family, so kids line up with their families every day. So it's sort of constantly reinforced for students. And when it comes time for learning centers, if I'm okay with 4 big groups, great. and I already have them preset. If I want smaller groups, I can take those 4 groups and just subdivide. So then I'll have 2 strings groups and 2 brass groups and 2 woodwinds groups and 2 percussion groups, and that makes my life really easy. Depending on your class size, you maybe want to do it a different way. Maybe 5 is a good number for you. Maybe, you know, you want to say like, well, I want 10 groups. I mean, do what feels comfortable for your classroom. When I divide groups up, I try and divide them up so that I have 3 to 5 students in a group. For me, that is optimal size, because anything less than 3, and it's a little bit awkward, especially if those 2 kids don't get along well together. So if you have 3, that's pretty good. Usually 3 can work pretty well, even if it's 2 of them get along really well and they're helping along the 3rd. That works great. Anything more than 5 and you get into talking crazy, get off task territory. So I generally say 3 to max 5. If you have a really, really big classes, you maybe go up to 6 or 7, maybe, but that makes the switching hard, it makes the materials hard, it makes everything tricky. If you think you have only 3 to 5 in a group, then at each station, the max number of, you know, users, materials you would need is 5. And so that's pretty easy to create enough materials so that you have at least 4 or 5 at each station. So that's what I shoot for, 3 to 5, and it makes my whole world easier, from kid management to, you know, resource creation. So that's my suggestion there. And that's why I break down my groups into 8. So even if I have, you know, 30 or let's say 32 in a classroom, if I break it down by 8, that makes it a nice manageable number of 4. So I like the 8, and it makes switching pretty easy. That way I can also create 8 centers and then have them rotate through. Makes my life a little easier. So I have my group set into those 4 different main families: the woodwind, strings, percussion, brass. And at the beginning of the year, I set them up. Now, my first year at the school, I just randomly divided them. And I went down the roster, and it was just like woodwind, strings, percussion, brass, woodwind, strings, percussion, brass, woodwind, strings, percussion. And I just sort of randomly put them in there. Second year through, I went through and did that randomly, and then I adjusted. I knew there were a couple kids who did not get along well together, so they did not go in the same group. In fact, I even thought about my standing chart at the end of my class, because, you know, I have them stand underneath the color that matches their group. So if I had 2 kids who did not get along, they did not even stand in lines next to one another. I would separate, you know, brass as my first line, so I'd have brass, and then I'd maybe put the kid who's offending the brass kid in the strings line or whatever, so they're not close together. That would mean that they're also not going to rotate together, they're not going to rotate next to each other, so I don't have that issue going on. If I have any kids who have a para, or kids who need particular help, I put them in the percussion family because I just think percussionists are generally troublemakers, and I mean, that is a stereotype, but you know what? I know and love a lot of percussionists. I was once a percussionist, so I can say I was a troublemaker. So anyway, I just put those kids in percussion. You could put them in whatever group you want, but it just lets me always know, like, I need to keep an eye on the green group, because that's percussion's color, and I know I gotta watch them. So if I know again, it's especially nice if I know if I'm gonna have paras coming. I put them in that percussion family, because then I know that I can follow them a little bit easier, and it just, again, it's just a way to sort of track and manage kids, and that makes my life a little easier too. So you can put them in randomly, you can put them in very strategically. The one thing I would say to not do is don't let kids choose where they go. If you let kids choose which group they're a part of, then that's like a recipe for disaster, because kids will choose to be with their best friends. And it's just been sort of proven that, like, if you're choosing to be with your best friend at a younger age, you're not going to get anything done. Because a lot of times they just self-destruct, or they get off task, or they, you know, do something else, or something reminds them something they did in the lunchroom or whatever. If you let them choose on their own, it just becomes drama. So I choose for them, and I take away that stress. So those are my thoughts about groups. I would love if you would shout out in the comments or any questions you have. I already saw someone who said, I married a percussionist. So Tiffany, you understand what I'm talking about. And then someone said, do you divide your groups randomly to make groups in your families? Yes, SJ, I do that. So I will just sort of randomly do that and then make adjustments as needed. Karen says, do you ever swap up the groups during the year? I never make a class-wide change. Kids always sort of generally stay together. But I will sometimes, if a kid, like you had a example, if so-and-so can't be together, well then I'll move them if they're in the group together. But I don't make a huge class-wide change because I see them only about 10 times a semester, and so that's not really enough it's not really enough time for them to figure out what group they are and then change everything. So someone said Flippity is a great website that you can use to put your class roster in. It'll divide up your kids for you. There's another one I wanted to show you really quickly if my computer works. So I use the app called Idokio, and I know I've shared about that before. Idokio, it's just an app for your iPad. It's like $11.99, and it's so absolutely worth it. I bought it once. It's not a subscription. You buy it once and you have that resource forever. But I love it because it lets me keep my student rosters. It lets me transfer grades. It's like super amazing for grade management and student management. But one of the things I wanted to show you is one of the special features that it has. And this never works well, this trying to flip the screens around, but I'm going to try it anyway. So here we go. Okay, welcome to my home office. I'm going to try and make this switch real quick here for you. Okay. So let's see. This is the Idokio website, and forever I was sure I was saying that wrong, but I looked up Idokio. I looked up the pronunciation, and that's what they want, Idokio. So anyway, I just want to show you this quick little YouTube video that they put together about creating and changing groups and using their automatic group generator. So in the app, you can have all your student profiles. And one of the things I love about it is that you can have their actual picture. You can take their picture and put it in. This cool little thing, what it's doing is, it's letting you generate. So you can say, I want 5 in a group. I want them in this specific order, and it'll change the seating chart for you. So if you wanted a circular group, you want them in lines, whatever helps you see that better. And you could mirror this onto your screen so that kids are actually seeing this too. But the nice thing about this is it is random. It is completely random. And so it's doing all of that work for you. And if you use this for student profile management anyway, you don't have to use an outside website to do it. It'll just do all of the changing for you. And as you can see, it's scrolling through. It'll let you have up to 10 custom seating plans. So if you have your regular seating chart, you could also have a separate seating chart just for centers. So that's one of the cool things. You can go on their website and see a little bit more about the cool functions that Idokio has. But I'll let you do that on your own and not spend a lot of time. Because I know some people can't access iPads or don't want to use iPads or having issues with iPads. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that so that we can go on to other content that works for all people. Okay, so I talked a little bit about groups. Let me talk about rotation, how to rotate, when to rotate. So I personally think it's best to do sort of a static rotation that you always do. So one of the things that I do is in my classroom, I always have centers sort of lined up around the edge of the classroom. So it's sort of a circular shape. And I always put centers down so that when kids go and sit at centers, they are facing the wall. I'm lucky that I have just a classroom that I can do that. If you're a traveling teacher and you're going to someone else's classroom, you have to adjust, right? But for me, I'm lucky that I'm able to put them in that sort of circular shape, and then they go from station to station to station. I don't say they're going clockwise. I just say that they're rotating to their right. So when they stand up, they move to their right, which is clockwise if you're facing the outside of the room, the perimeter of the room. So one of the things that you might consider as you're doing your setup, you might say, okay, that works, sure, but I want to use lines or whatever. I would also say that your setup depends on what you're putting in centers. So if one of your centers is an ORF instrument exploration center, which one of mine is, then I need to make sure that my groups can get to the ORF instruments. Or if one of your centers is the smartboard, well, then you need to take in account that they're going to have to rotate through there. So having a kid rotate from like the corner to the smartboard, to the other corner, to the middle, to the thing, to the over, to the, like in this weird star zigzag formation, that doesn't make sense to them. But just having them rotate sort of in an easy rotation around the room, that will be easier. So I like that sort of circular around the room thing. I always have, and I know I've talked about this before, but I have station signs that I use. And so these are just really simple. I've got an arrow that says rotate. That makes it really easy for students to figure out where they go. And I just set that up around the room. Each station has its own sign. That's upside down, sorry. Has its own sign that just says station 1 or station 2 or station 3. You know, the first time I did stations, I wrote on the sign, I wrote like, station 1, recorder. At this station, you need to blah, 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 blah. And I put all the directions on the sign. And then I laminated it. And then I realized the next time when I didn't want station 1 to be whatever activity that was, that I'm just gonna have to remake the whole thing. So then I decided, oh, well, okay, I'm not gonna do that. And so I just made sort of generic signs. And these are great because then in the station with the other materials, you can have an explanation slide or whatever. But if you want to, like, this is especially nice if like your first class of the day is 5th grade and your second class of the day is the 4th grade. And maybe 5th grade is going to use ukuleles as a station, but 4th grade is not. Then you could just have them say like station 1, station 2 instead of like ukulele station. Then you can reuse the signs. You don't have to pull up the signs in between classes. You can just leave it but change the content that's at the station. So I like doing it that way. I have a set of free signs if you're interested in using them on my Teachers Pay Teachers store. But I also have a set of the generic like station 1, 2, 3, 4. But I also have a set of station specific, like instrument station or orchestra station or whatever, if you like using that too. So it's totally up to you. You could even have the station 1, 2, 3, 4 as like the sign, and then when they get there, you could have a thing that says like tech station or whatever, then you could switch out, but leave the number where it is. I hope that makes sense. Okay, cool. And so I see Jennifer saying, I love these signs. I put them plastic sheeting and then write with dry erase marker. Cool. That's something you could do. There's also, let me see if I have one right here. I think I do. These dry erase pockets are super duper cool. You can get them like 24 to a pack or something, but you just take whatever you want and you just slip it inside the little pocket, and then you can use it like a dry erase board. And you could just use a sheet protector, but this is like sturdier, and so you'll replace this like never, and you'll replace those sheet protectors maybe a lot. I didn't know these existed until like a year ago. So anyway, try it out. It's awesome. But anyway, I like using these too for station signs or for materials or whatever. Let's see. Oh, I was going to show you one more thing. And somebody else mentioned this I saw in the comments. They said, let me see if I can find that comment. Nope, I lost it. Somebody said that they used a map. They projected up a map on the screen. I've done something like that too with my instrument petting zoo. Every kid when they come in, sort of as an exit ticket, sort of as a keep them honest about actually doing something at each station when I do an instrument petting zoo, I give them this little piece of paper. On one side it has zoo questions, which has a lower sound, soprano or bass instrument, which are named for 2 of the 4 instrument families. So these are just questions they have to answer along the way. And then their choices. My favorite instrument was blank because I found out that the blank and the blank are in the same instrument family because today I learned. Okay, so those are just some things to sort of keep them honest as they go along, right? But on the other side, to make sure that they make it to all the different stations, I have my map, my zoo map. And so there's the pitch percussion, the membranes, the shakers, scrapers, woods, and metals. because those are my 5 areas in the zoo, the instrument petting zoo. And then, do you visit them? Did you visit them all? Name one instrument at each of the zoo locations. Pitched, shaker scrapers, membranes, woods, metals. So this is just sort of my like checklist to make sure that kids get to each of the spots and to make sure they get through all of the stations. So it's a cool little thing to sort of keep them going. And this is just something that I use the instrument petting zoo. I've not used it for class instruction. I use it for like an open house or like a parent-teacher conference, things like that, fine arts night. And I use that so that there may be a lot of kids coming through the room, so it's not like a normal classroom experience. So I like using this, but I know a ton of people who use this to introduce kids to a lot of different instruments and use it during the day. I'm actually considering using it for a little bit later in the school year, around the time of field day, just to give kids a little bit more instrument time before the end of school when they're getting a little bit antsy. So I've not personally tried it yet in the classroom, but I'm going to take people's advice and try it this year and see how that goes. But you can use a map like this or a checklist like this. It doesn't have to be pretty. It could just be like a checklist where it's just like instrument, rhythm, composition, whatever your stations are, to make sure that they get all the way through. And then if halfway through the rotation you're like, okay, time's up for today, they can turn in their checklist and then they know where they haven't been the next time they come back. So, sorry, zoom out. Let's see, someone else had a question about grouping kids together, it looks like, on Idokio, and it looks like someone answered their question. So it's how do you avoid certain kids being put together? And there's actually, it looks like a setting in Toolkit Group Maker, and at the bottom it says don't group together. Cool. All right, so let me talk a little bit about time at each station and how to switch between stations in sort of an effective way. I would say, people always ask, how much time should kids spend at centers? I don't know. There is no right answer for this because it really depends on a lot of things. It depends on your kids. It depends on their knowledge level. It depends on the difficulty of what you're putting in each station. It depends on their age, on their prior knowledge. So there is no one right answer because I could say, oh, 3 minutes is good. But then if you give them like, compose a 16-bar phrase, they're not going to get that done in 3 minutes. So it really depends on what it is. So you might think about, as you're planning centers, what tasks, like maybe if you think 4 or 5 minutes, they won't get too antsy by the end of 5 minutes. You might think, what tasks should I put in this center that will only take them 5 minutes? And then maybe there's an extension onto the task where if you have real superstars and they get done before the 5 minutes is up, what will keep them busy? But, what's the one thing that they need to get done in those few minutes that they can actually get done? So time is sort of tricky. One of the other things to think about is how much time do you have? If you have a 30-minute class and it takes 3 minutes to get in and 3 minutes to get out, well, that's 6 minutes off of your class. And so then you have, really your class is 24 minutes. Well, if you have 8 different small groups and 8 centers, that means you only get 3 minutes at each center. So, transition time of 0 minutes, between centers. So it's tricky because you don't want to run out of time. So one of the things that I've suggested to people, and I suggested this at TMEA this last week, if you have 8 centers, you can either have 8 all be different, and then you want kids to get through all 8, or you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, stations 1, 2, 3, 4 be different, and stations 5, 6, 7, 8 just be a copy of 1, 2, 3, 4. So for instance, station 1 and station 5 might both be recorder stations, and station 2 and station 6 might both be iPad stations, and stations 3 and station 7 might both be ukulele or whatever. But that way, kids can spend a little bit more time at each station. So if I started at station 1 and I get through station 1, 2, 3, 4, I've effectively made it through all the content that is supposed to be covered. And so if I make it to station 5, then I'm repeating what I did at station 1. And so then that means that like you can spend more time at each station and not stress so much about, I got to get them through, because they're never going to get done. And you can sort of just worry a little bit less. But kids, the nice thing about that is that you might ask, well, why not just have 4 mega stations? Well, then you can still separate kids into manageable groups. So kids are in manageable groups, they're moving at the pace that works for them, you're leaving yourself some transition time, and you're getting through all the content you want. I hope that makes sense. And I'll explain that better in just a second. Okay, so things to help you switch. My favorite thing is using instruments, and so there are 3 instruments I love for switching, and I have 2 of them here, and 1 of them I don't. So the first is called a stir xylophone, and it looks sort of like this, and it makes this really fun little sound. And it's a stirring xylophone, and actually mine came with a spoon. This is the West brand comes with a spoon, which I think is hilarious. But it's a really unique sound, and kids will stop to listen to it, and then they will know it's time to rotate, which is also cool because like you're like, okay, circular motion, let's get going. So like, let's get moving, rotate. So it makes it a little easier. The other one that I love is called a Zenergy chime, and when you hit the chime, it's this clear, easy sound. It sort of cuts through the static and the talking and whatever, and kids like to stop and listen to it, and then they also know that it's the time to change. The one that's a little louder that I did not mention, I will mention but I don't have, is the ratchet, which is that cranking sound, and that is great if you are doing recorders or Orff instruments or ukuleles where it'll be hard for them to hear the sound. And so I use that sort of louder, a little bit more abrasive instrument to get their attention quicker, because otherwise, you could be sitting here just going like, and they maybe wouldn't stop. But the ratchet, you can't avoid that sound. So those are just 3 of my favorite instruments, and as always on Facebook and in my Instagram, in my profile, I have a link to my Musical Mondays recap page on my blog, and on that blog it has links to all of these things I've been talking about so far, including those 3 instruments. So if you're interested in those instruments and you want to see them and see a better description, you can click on there, and it has a link to that. There's one more online thing I wanted to show you. A couple weeks ago, I mentioned my first Musical Mondays video back in January that I was starting a new Facebook group for my page, for my blog, and it's called Every Moment Matters, a music education community. And in that community, people just ask questions, and it's sort of a let's dialogue and work through together and stay really positive about the whole thing, because I know it's easy to get stressed and to just vent, but this is a way to like deal with issues and really talk through things. And on there, I talked a little bit about centers one day, and someone said, oh, I've got this cool tool, and they shared it, and it's a really cool tool I wanted to show you. This is, apparently the Idokia video just kept going on something else. This is a timer. It's an online timer, and it's really, really cool. I'm going to try this flip around again so you can see this better. Sorry, Instagram and Facebook. You're getting a close-up of me. Okay, let's switch this around. So this is a really cool little timer, and you might be able to see this. But on the timer page, and this is linked in the notes page on my blog, but it's a really simple timer. It's free, and there we go. Okay, so what it does is you can set the start time and the stop time. Currently, it's set to 7 seconds, and you can change down here. You can change the name. You can call it timer. You can call it centers, or you can call it whatever. You can have it loop. You can have it do it just once. You can choose the different sound that comes out. So right now it's set on drum, and you can try it. Just as a trial, like, I don't know if I want that. Let's see what ta-da is. Okay, that's pretty cool. Let's see what boo hiss is. This would be fun. That's usually what I hear when I'm like, okay, it's time to rotate. And they're like, no, I just figured out what I'm doing. Okay, and then there are these ones that'll be like a longer. So maybe it's a 26-second robot. Let's listen to that. Oh my gosh. I had not previewed that sound. So this would be nice if, like, okay, this one says 11-second happy sad. If you say by the time the sound's done, you have to be at your next station. This is the happy sad. So if kids know that they only have 11 seconds by the time it's done, or there's one sonata or western or whatever, oh my gosh, or burping. Okay, I'll try it. That is disgusting. Okay. And it just goes on. So I set it to gong now, and it's at 7 seconds. So if you say, okay, ready, go, you can even set it to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever you want your station to be, and then you just press go. If this is playing on your smart board, then your kids will, oh, sorry, I hit set. If this is going on your smart board, your kids can see the count up to how long it's going to be and also know that it's coming. So here, let's try it. In 7 seconds, it should play the gong sound. There you go, and it resets itself. So this one is currently set to loop, but you can just set it to do only once. You can change the color, you can change the font, you can change the size. I mean, this is super, super customized, and you can save a link to your custom timer. Tracy King is watching and just said, when you hear the burp, you may have to move to the next station. I played that because I knew you were watching. Facebook told me you were watching, so I was like, oh, burp, I guess Tracy's in the video, I'll show her. No, so this is super, super cool, and this was something that someone recommended to me because of that online Facebook group. So if you're interested, there's some cool tips that are coming through. The group is sort of just started up, so there are a lot of really cool things that maybe you could also learn on there. So go join, and you just search Every Moment Matters Music Education Community, and you'll be able to see it. So I see this is the count up timer, I think, and then there's also one count down timer. I don't know what that is, but it's probably the same thing in reverse. I'm gonna have to play around with this because obviously I'm gonna need to use this in my classroom. Pretty cool. And thanks for that tip to the person who left it there. All right, let's flip around, and I wanna share two of my most favoriteest topics about centers before the video's over. Okay, I think I'm done flipping folks around so that I don't have to move this camera anymore. All right, so I wanted to talk about using and reusing and reusing and reusing, because my thought is if you're gonna make something, that you're gonna make it in color on cardstock and you're gonna print it and cut it and laminate it and bag it up, you are gonna use that thing forever. And so like, that's my plan. So I want to create things, and I want to use things that can be multi-year, that can be multi-lesson, that can maybe even be multi-grade. So I can use that resource in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places so that I'm not constantly creating or changing things, because we have a lot to do in our lives already, and why spend all of that time with a paper cutter? So that's why I try and find resources and things that I can just reuse in lots of different ways. So for instance, when I do centers, I don't start them out as centers. I usually start it as a whole group activity that maybe we do for just 2 or 3 minutes as a class starter activity at the beginning of class, or maybe we do just, together as a large group game. Then it might become a small group game in the next class that we spend, ooh, remember that game we played? Now you get to play with your family, and you have 4 minutes. Okay, so then they go and they do their little family groups, and we do that. And then then it'll show up in a center. But I don't just make it for just the center. I want to use it in a lot of different ways. And the cool thing about that is that if you do it as a whole group activity first, you iron out some of the, oh, but I don't know how to play this, or I'm not sure how this works. You iron out some of those problems because you've done it together as a class once, and kids can ask those questions and make those mistakes in the large group, and then once they're in centers, they can sort of work more on their own because they've already done it once. So I try and do things sort of large group first. And then let me show you one of my favorite resources, newer resources, and I love it because it's Star Wars. And I'm a Star Wars nerd, and I see that Amy Abbott just joined, and so Amy's also a Star Wars nerd, and so is Tracy, so this is our hooray moment. So this is a little rhythm game that I created, I don't know, last year or so, and so it has all these little game boards. It says Escape the Death Star, and so there's Darth Vader, or let's see, Board the Millennium Falcon, or the Rebels need a new base, and so there are all these little game boards, right? Okay, so for each one, there are these little open squares, and so in those squares, you need to put these separate rhythm cards, because then the little, so the top says Destroy the Death Star, and then below it says Put 8 characters in a row and read their rhythms. Well, the characters look like this. So each little card has its own rhythm. You can see. So Darth Vader has ta-dee, ta-dee, ta, ta. And then R2-D2 has rest, ta, takadimi, ta. And Yoda has ta, ta-dee, ta-dee, ta, right? Okay, so each one has its own little, each character has its own thing. So the idea is then you put them, let's show you really quickly. So you put Yoda on the little card, you put 4 of these characters together, you read them all, and then once you've done that successfully, you can either shuffle them, redo it again, change them out, or you can just switch to the next card and do it again, right? Okay, so that's the idea, but like I said, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it, if I'm gonna make this thing, I'm gonna use it over and over and over. So I have these in different levels of difficulty. So maybe in one center, or maybe for one grade, I would only put out the cards that have tas and rests, right? So then they can do the whole activity with just these cards. And then maybe for the next grade or the next time we use it, I will start including the half note cards, right? So then the kids can interact with a more difficult rhythm. And then if we get really, really good, I'll add in like the half rest, okay? Or maybe I'll add in 16th notes if they're ready for it. And these cards got mixed up because my after-school kiddos were using them. Great. And then there's the 16th note with 8-note pairs. So there are a lot of different ways that you can just sort of differentiate. So what I might do is if, like I said earlier, when I'm planning out centers, maybe I want center 1 and center 5 to be the same thing, right? So then I'm not creating a million things. So if I print out and create this center once, maybe I put 4 of these game boards in center 1, and then I put 4 of the game boards, different game boards, in center 5. Or maybe I'll put all quarter notes and 8th notes and quarter rests in center 1, and I'll add in half notes in center 5. Or another thing that you can do, I have the same game just with a different theme. So the same game, the same idea I have as a monster theme. So send them away, put 8 monsters in a row and read their rhythms to make them go away. Collect the creatures, put 8 monsters in a row and read their rhythms to go away. Ocean monster attack. So then I have that as a monster theme. I have it as, an underwater theme. There's a food theme. There's an emoji theme. So the cool thing about that is that then they know how to play the game, but they feel like it's new because it's different characters and settings. And so I just take that same thing and I change, I change the context so it doesn't feel exactly the same. Here's another example. So I have treble clef centers, and in these treble clef centers, they get little baggies where they have to match the word, the treble clef word, to its picture on a little staff, right? This is the underwater edition, so I could put that in center 2, right? And then, oh, Tracy, I'll get to that in just a second. And then maybe in center whatever, the next one, I put in the popsicle edition. So it's just a different theme, but it means that kids feel like it's different. Or I could even just use it, one for one grade and one for another grade, or you can use them in all different ways. But using the different themes makes kids feel like they're doing something different, even though it's the same sort of, activity. But I like using those similar activities, not because I'm lazy and I just want to create the same exact thing over and over, but I like using those same activities so that kids are successful and know what the expectation for the game and the activity is going in. So they have to think less about, well, wait, what am I doing in this station? But they think just like, oh, I know what I'm doing, and then they go for it. So that makes my life a little bit easier. But you can take those activities and print them off and then vary them by difficulty level. You can vary them by theme. You can vary them by, how many cards you put in a station. I mean, there are just a lot of different ways to do that. But just think about your resource. Once you've printed it and created it, once you've come up or once you've created that thing, that resource, think about different ways that you can organize it or reuse it in different ways so that you're not constantly creating and producing more and more and more. You're just taking what you already have that you know works and you're just reusing it in different ways. Okay, and now let me talk about storage. So storage, and this is going to come back to Tracy's question. There are a lot of ways to store these, and I'll tell you that the very first year I did centers, I made a big old mistake. I was like, centers, awesome. I print all this stuff out, and so I got big manila envelopes, and I used a big old marker to write on them what each thing was, and I filed it away into a tub. But of course, it was like my first year teaching, I like bought the cheap one, which was the opaque one, and I couldn't see through what it was. So I have all these opaque tubs on shelves with manila envelopes inside. I was constantly looking for things. I could never find what I wanted. So I finally got wise, and I bought clear tubs. So clear tubs are a must, so you can like see what's inside. And then I would say you should color code things, so that when you're out there looking, maybe you remember that like, oh, the purple is rhythm and the green is, you know, or the staff, and, you know, let's see what my color coding is. Oh, right now, yellow is recorder and red is instruments of the orchestra. So I have them all sort of color coded so that I can find things really easily. These envelopes they're called like poly envelopes, I think. And I have a link in the notes page, but they're just plastic envelopes, and they're big enough to put a full-size 8.5 by 11 page in them, which is amazing because gallon bags, these pages that are printed out on cardstock and cut out to the edge, will not fit. Stress me out. But these work. The only thing is that these can't get too full. So let me show you my example. So the ribbon cards, when I have them all in there, it gets pretty bulky, right? But it does fit and it does snap closed, and these have weathered. I've taken them on the road when I do my centers day-long presentation for school districts and stuff. They've made it through my suitcase in TSA, and they've made it through the hands of elementary school students. So I know they worked well, but it's something that I may have to replace in a couple years, but you can buy them pretty inexpensively. So I put that link to the listing on Amazon on my recap page so you can see it and just sort of see the ones that I bought. You can get different kinds, I'm sure, but these work really well. Or this could just be for storage when you like file it away. If you're like, I don't want kids to touch these, they're too nice. And then when you hand them out to kids, you can put them in baggies. So you know, you can get because a lot of parents will donate these at the beginning of the school year, or maybe they'll donate them to the classrooms, and the classroom teachers will donate them to you. So these Ziplocs work great. I mean, don't get the ones from Dollar Tree, but get the nicer ones. One of the things that I learned a couple years ago that changed my life, if you take a hole punch and you punch the corner of the bag, then when kids zip close their center and fold it up and go like this to push all the air out, it doesn't pop your bag because there's a little hole that like all the air can escape. It changed my life, so you should try it. But you only have to poke like one little hole in the bottom to let the air out. It's amazing. But when you store in Ziplocs, I mean, also think about color coding there. Like for instance, these recorder cards, I have on different colors of cardstock for different levels of difficulty. So I can, you know, think like, oh, I don't want the yellows and the reds because that's too hard for what we're doing right now. I just want the blues and the greens, and put that back in the bag. Or maybe the purple cardstock goes in because it's low E or whatever, you know, so that helps you sort of quickly just assess as you're getting your materials ready, you know, what really needs to go in the bag, what really needs to go in the center as you pull that out. You could also color code by grade level or by, you know, whatever. I would say maybe not by grade level, because what if one of your grades is really ahead and you have to start pulling from another thing? I mean, but just color code so that you can catch things really quickly. One of the other things that worked for me too is you can also take little just colorful dots, those sticker dots, and you can stick them inside the bag. And then, you know, you can have kids at the end of the lesson say like, okay, if you've got a bag with a pink dot, you need to bring that and go put it on the table. Or if you have one with an orange dot, you need to go put that in the chair or whatever. But these, if you stick them inside the bag, kids won't really pick them off too much. And whatever, they're stickers, so you can always replace that. But if you stick them inside the bag, especially if you stick them way down in the corner, kids don't get them too much. Won't get to them as much. Okay, bags, envelopes, hole punches, containers, color coding. Yeah, I got through all of those storage ideas. So I love all of the questions and things that I'm seeing already. And also a lot of the sassy comments from Amy and Tracy, it looks like. So if you have any other ideas or questions, like I said at the beginning of the video, you know, one of the things about centers is that people get caught up in the logistics and the questions, and then they stop their process. They don't end up doing centers because they're just like, I don't know, it's just too much work. It's not too much work. And one of the greatest things about it is that if you plan your centers out, you know, maybe station 1 is rhythm reading, and station 2 is notes in the treble clef, and station 3 is yada, yada, yada. You plan it all out, then you think, oh, I've got an extra station. I'm going to put this book in there because, you know, kids can go through and keep, you know, that remember that book that we did. Or I could put in, you know, this thing that we worked on a little bit last year, and I haven't had a chance to go back and do that. So you can put some of those things in centers to help kids sort of remember and redo or explore as you're going, so that you don't get too far behind. Centers let you sort of catch up on things too and explore and try. And centers are just a great way to do a lot of different things at one time. So anyway, like I said, a lot of people get caught up in those questions, and they get caught up and stressed out by the logistics. So if you continue to have questions, please email me, and I'll try and answer those questions, or leave a comment on the video and I'll try and come back and answer that. I saw one question. Someone said, how do you use your paper cutter with the laminating sleeves so that the cards and everything are cut out straight? I struggle getting them straight with the laminating sleeves. Do you mean cut so that they fit in these? Or, oh, you're using like the home laminator, I'm assuming, so that they get in there and then get cut right. I don't know your struggles because I don't use the home laminator, so I'm not so good at that. But I know that when I did use the home laminator and things didn't line up, then they cut weird. And if you cut that home lamination stuff, it doesn't seal as well. So if you can use school laminators, that saves a lot of the stress depending on the type of lamination you have and the quality of the laminator. I spent a lot of time laminating, so I have some thoughts. But if you use the home pockets, it just gets tricky. So you sort of have to decide, you know, how are you going to do that? In that case, you might just want to buy some dry erase pockets and then put your stuff in here so that you can use and reuse. Even if you're not going to write on it, this is a great protector so that your stuff stays a little bit more secure and doesn't get as beat up, if that makes sense. The dry erase pockets won't save you from everything, and they're not as good as lamination, but they do help you out a lot. Okay. Oh, I don't know anything about the TTESS Texas stuff, but I will come back, Holly, and look at that, and because I don't know what that is. Let's see. Oh, and Sarah says, am I right that you don't typically go through each station and explain? No, because I see kids once every 8 school days, so that's about 10 times a semester. And if I spent a whole class going through, or even half the class going through and talking just through all of those centers, I would lose a whole class. And so I try and put into centers things that we have already previously done. Or if it does need explanation, I try and go through it quickly, or have I tell one group, and then I say, before you switch, before you rotate, I need one person to stay behind to make sure the next group knows how to do it or something. Because if it's and that's the thing is I would never put in 8 completely new activities. They should be things that kids have sort of done, maybe with new difficulty levels, but not 8 completely new things, if that makes sense. And Sarah, if you have more questions about that, please send me a message, or I'll try and go back and explain a little bit later, a little bit better later. Okay, so I see lots of great questions and things coming in. So please keep adding questions, and send me an email if you still have questions, or send me messages through Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I'd love to try and answer those questions. Or I see people answering other people's questions, so that's amazing. All right, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I'm going to plan on talking about centers later because I'm getting a ton of great feedback about this was really helpful, or I loved hearing about, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll try and do more about that. But like I said, a lot of this conversation continues to happen on my Facebook group, which is Every Moment Matters Music Education Community. So you can go join that if you want tonight, and you can ask some questions in there and get some great feedback too. All right, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night. Don't forget there's that links page on my blog, makemomentsmatter.org/videos, and then it's Musical Mondays recap. You can see a lot of the resources I've talked about tonight. There are links to them, or blog posts about, or YouTube video explanations, things like that, so you can get a little bit more information. All right, thanks so much. Have a great day, y'all.